Hey there, it's Alex for a week 2 video. Um, Starting off with what terms were the most important concepts of this week's lessons. Um, I am not sociology majored. This isn't really what I've been studying, so this was a lot of new information for me, like a lot. Um, but it was all pretty straightforward. So I thought that one of the most important things to define, just in terms of um, understanding why we should care, was stakeholders. So the people who have or think they have a personal interest in the outcome of a policy. This interest motivates them to attempt to influence the development of that policy. So without people feeling like they have stake in something, then there's no reason for them to care about being prepared for disasters or when disasters happen, if they should help their neighbors or their community. So they subdivided that stakeholder group into a few categories. Community stakeholders was divided into social groups, economic groups, and political groups. So the social groups being households, nonprofits, churches, and I thought it was interesting that they noted that households were the most influential group of people for being prepared for natural and any sort of disaster, which makes sense because you need to take accountability for yourself. But I feel like a lot of people overlook that and just assume that some nonprofit organization or the government is going to be available for them to help them if some sort of a disaster does happen. So then after that, there was government organizations, economic organizations, businesses, social institutions that organizes the flow of goods and services. So that's always something that's kind of freaky. What if something would happen where grocery stores couldn't get food, or some major thing happened, and what do? You don't have access to food and water, the internet, electricity, telephone, any of that stuff. So those people have a huge stake. Obviously, they want to be up and running and making money. And I guess for the sociologists and political officials that are trying to advocate for disaster preparedness, they need to focus on getting this business owners, the people that have all of the money and the means for taking these actions, to realize that without being prepared, then they're really going to be screwed if something crazy does happen. So then we had political, the municipality, at the town and city level, and at the state level, and then at the country level. And it's just all sorts of, they listed a ton of different agencies. And I guess the one that everyone hears about is FEMA. And they're supposed to be able to help at any sort of disaster, and I think they do. But if anything, through reading these chapters and the slides and the 9/11 paper, it really made it clear that they're not going to save the day. I mean, you have to be prepared at a home level and county, state, just kind of all the way up, so that those bigger organizations can actually help you if you have to be prepared for them to help you. Let's see. Can define disaster. The website that we linked to said vulnerability plus hazard divided by capacity equals disaster, which I thought was an interesting way to put it. But a disaster is a non-routine event that exceeds the capacity of the affected area to respond to it in such a way as to save lives, to preserve property, and to maintain the social, ecological, economic, and political stability of the affected region. So there were lots of scales as far as how to classify disasters, which at first I thought were a little bit unusual. Why does it matter how large the disaster is? But I guess as far as planning, that's important. What was your muddiest point? I thought all of the concepts were pretty straightforward. Like I said, it was a lot of brand new information, but it made sense. The most confusing part is how how we have to convince people to take care of themselves. Whose responsibility does it fall on to convince businesses and political organizations and politicians and even people at the household level to take responsibility for themselves and be prepared for these disasters? Like, who does that fall on? Sociologists, I guess. And I thought it was interesting too, not muddy, but that disasters were the highest destructiveness with poor people, women, children, young people, disabled people in environmentally and socially and economically vulnerable places. So, like, Katrina hit just like the bayous of Louisiana, and we've got the water shortage or the water contamination in Flint, Michigan, and all of these people who aren't really in a position to make themselves prepared. Like, a lot of times they're just scraping by as it is, so they're not really going to have a back pile of emergency things that they might need in a community system put together, because they're just trying to get by in the day-to-day. So how do you convince the people with all of the money, with the politicians and the rich business owners, to make it seem like it's worth it for them to change the policies for the poor, impoverished people in these disaster areas? So I guess that kind of ties into the last thing. If you had to lead an in-person class discussion, what would you ask? It would just be something along the lines of that. How do we care? Who should care? What are the steps that we need to take moving forward to kind of get people excited about being prepared for disasters? There's also a phenomenon with bunkers. People get bunkers for disasters, and people with the bug out bags, and there's like The Walking Dead. I feel like has inspired this whole group of people that are really prepared for disasters. So where do the people that can't even survive and the people that are just freaking out and think that a disaster is around the corner at any moment, how do we find a middle ground and get everybody a little bit more prepared? That's a really big question. So I don't know who has the answer to that. No one. But it's worth a shot, right? A lot of good information this week, and I'm looking forward to next week. Right, thanks. Bye.